Welcome, and we are live. It is the Sherdog Radio UFC Vegas 103 recap show. Do not adjust your phone or laptop or however you're watching this. Keith Schillen is in fact out. It's either, it's either girls softball or murder. So here's hoping it's girls softball that has him unavailable this evening. But the man on the spot, Dayne Fox, thank you as always for stepping up and actually volunteering to step up. Like as soon as you heard that Keith was not going to be here, so I appreciate that. Definitely good to have your insights on things. Go ahead and unmute your mic and tell these folks how you feel about the main event.
Oh boy. Well, first of all, it's always fun to be here. So I will. Hey, I'll volunteer to come here anytime, hang out with you, hang out with the regulars here. So that's always a good time. And I would much rather talk about that than talk about how the main event went, because that was not a fun main event, especially given that we love to hype up flyweight fights. We finally get a flyweight main event, and it was kind of a stinker.
And credit to Keith. He's not here to give himself flowers, so I'll give him some, because he's the one who normally says you take any two fighters out of the top 20 in the men's flyweight division in the UFC, and you probably have a competitive fight, and you probably have a fun fight, but this one would be one of the possible exceptions because you have a bit of a grinder in Almabayev against a guy in Kape who, if you have nothing to go on but his highlight reel, you know, he looks unbelievable, but in between those highlights can sometimes be slow to pull the trigger. In light of that, I thought it was a good performance from Kape. It is rare that we've seen Kape just take control of a fight, take control of the distance, the rhythm, and just force the issue on his opponent. Like he's normally too willing to wait for someone to eat that, you know, that overhand fastball. Here, he was the one making Almabayev uncomfortable. And leaving aside the multiple uncalled eye pokes that probably made him more than uncomfortable, but even short of that, like, it's a shame because I feel like we're going to have this conversation for the second week in a row after UFC event, but Beltran's goof kind of shortchanges everybody involved here, including Kape.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a couple of errors on Beltran's part. The first is the fact that he missed not one but two eye pokes, and then with the first one,
missed one eye poke where he paused the action, went to the cage side replay guy. The replay guy either gives him the wrong info or Beltran mishears or misinterprets it. So I don't know where all the blame is to go around here, but all I know is that if I were Asu Almabayev, I would have just been like turning my heels and running at top speed by the end of that shit too. Because
he did.
Short of that, like, yeah, like, he was all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but to be honest with you, I think the other mistake was the fact that he took Almabayev's word for it. Referees should not allow the fighters to dictate when to call the pause in the action. I hate that. I get the fact that, you know, they want to develop a good rapport with the fighters, you know, and say, hey, look, man, I trust you, all that fun stuff, because the fighters need to have trust that the ref's going to be there to protect them. But you cannot be taking their word for that, because, you know, for these fighters, win or lose, you know, win is extra money for them. It's a bigger paycheck. So, you know, that old phrase of if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. You better believe that fighters will take advantage of that, and they'll fake eye pokes or whatever. Josh Koscheck was notorious for that. So
I mean, Josh Koscheck, low key one of the biggest villains in MMA history, caught on film, like faking, you know, fouls. So yeah, and it's interesting because of all the criticisms that can be fairly leveled at Mike Beltran, failure to control what's going on in the octagon is not normally one of them. He normally is over involved and kind of making himself part of the story. And anytime there's a foul, he looks like a, you know, junior high school principal breaking up a scuffle in the cafeteria. Yeah. So, and you know, the guy's a career former, I think he's retired at this point, cop, No pun intended. Yeah, normally being in control of the situation is not his problem, but tonight, yeah, would love to have some more clarity about what happened during that impromptu timeout he took. Bobby Boucher, and by the way, good, good on everybody already cracking in the chat there, but Bobby says I might be in the minority, but I don't think the eye rakes affected the outcome. It's possible. I mean, they may or may not have done tons of damage or made it so that Almabayev couldn't see. But considering that Almabayev was having serious trouble pulling the trigger on closing the distance, shooting for takedowns, basically, getting inside and getting his game running on a taller guy, a couple of near miss eye pokes, I don't blame him at all for those starting to take him out of his game plan or making it harder for him to engage his game plan. Even if the eye pokes themselves were not that damaging, we can't judge these things purely on the results. Like they're illegal for a reason.
Yeah, they can swing the momentum of a fight. Like Almabayev was starting to kind of get into a groove in the second round. Working to the body. Even if he would have threatened the wrestling, I think that would have certainly changed things up. But at the same time, he might be more reluctant to engage after getting an eye poke. And given that Beltran missed it, he's like, oh, crap, if I keep going in and he's going to miss this, which happened twice, that's easily going to mess with Almabayev's mental game. So, you're right, I think, Boucher, when it comes to the damage. But damage isn't the only thing that matters in these types of situations.
And Jeff Culp says when he, presuming he means Mike Beltran, cut off his beard, he lost all his good reffing powers. That is a great line, but what I don't think he actually has a beard. I think it is literally just a mustache that meets in the bottom. Like it's weird. He is the walrus. I'm in report sounding like Joe Rogan 2 weeks ago. We need fight gloves. Basically, Joe Rogan was saying a couple weeks ago that we need to go to what kickboxers would call bag gloves. What kickboxers typically will use in the gym. No, I don't even want to go down. Something worth saying after I made all the semi excuses for Kape saying, or all the semi excuses for Almabayev, that the eye pokes might have thrown him off mentally, might have thrown off his game plan. It's worth noting that even in the first round, before the eye pokes were any kind of issue, Almabayev was weirdly reluctant to pull the trigger on really committing to a takedown attempt. Did you pick up any of that vibe?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And Dev was commenting on it hard in our thread on our Sherdog thread, but yeah, he was 100% correct on that one. Like I kept waiting for Almabayev to make a serious threat to go for the takedown. I think he had one serious one, and he didn't complete it, but it kind of did make Kape step back a little bit. But
exactly, every time he even tried a takedown, even if it was a terrible attempt and he got nowhere close to actually getting in on the hips and getting him on his butt, it stopped Kape from rolling forward for the next 15 to 30 seconds. For that alone, it would have been worth continuing to invest in the takedown attempts. Like, if you go 2 for 14 on takedowns, it doesn't mean those are wasted effort if it allows your striking to get going or prevents your opponent from getting theirs going. But it was kind of I feel like it was a mixture of, forgive the pun, good cop, like a Manel Kape that actually fights with a sense of urgency and takes control of the fight, and a weird performance by Almabayev, which was worsened by, again, 2 uncalled rakes to the eye. What do you do next with Manel Kape? He had been scheduled to take on Brandon Royval tonight in a fight that would almost certainly have been a title eliminator. Is this as good as that for Kape? Does he move on? Do you remake the Royval fight? Like, what would you do with Manel Kape after this fight? And in the chat, let us know what would you do with these guys. Are you going to treat this as an untainted win for Kape and have him move on as if he won? If so, what are you going to do with him? And what do you do with Almabayev, who just had a 17 fight win streak snapped, just lost his first fight in the UFC? What are you doing with him?
For me, I probably would rebook the Royval match. I can't speak tonight. Royval match. It's so hard to figure out what to do with flyweight right now because Pantoja has fought and beat everybody, including Kape. So I'm kind of reluctant to give him a title shot off of this win. Not that Almabayev's a bad fighter, but Almabayev didn't look to be at his best. You know, I want Kape to go in there with a name that's proven and established, which I hate to say it, Almabayev is not yet, or at least a win where, you know, blood and guts dominate, either domination or blood and guts, cutting it out. And I wouldn't quite say this was domination. And it like I said, it was just kind of flat. So I would rebook the Royval match, especially given that the UFC looks like they're going to have Pantoja fight Kai Kara France. And yeah.
Yeah. For Kape, I would be fine if they wanted to remake the Royval fight. It would depend on how long it will be before Royval's ready to go. As a quick side note, can I say that it's completely unsurprising that Royval had to pull out of a fight because of getting concussions in training? The guy seems to have no chill. We're talking about a guy whose nickname is Raw Dog, and as if that weren't bad enough, after one of his first couple of UFC wins, he started trying to explain what his nickname meant on camera, and the fastest ever hand speed in the octagon was Anik taking the mic away from Royval's face as he started to explain that. So
I remember that. That was great.
Yeah, that was amazing. What do you do with Almabayev? And spoiler, Colby Saul already scooped me. Give me Almabayev versus another really promising prospect coming off of his first UFC loss in Tatsuro Taira. I like that one a lot.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. Other than that, give me, or I would say someone in a similar situation, Bruno Silva, who had been on a nice little streak, looked to be moving into title contention, and got turned away, you know, in his last time out. So
I like those, but actually I had a different one. Another fighter who had a disappointing performance in their first UFC main event, Amir Albazi.
Oh, I don't mind that at all either. And it's an interesting thing with Taira, Almabayev, and Albazi. All three of them are coming off a loss where, without taking any credit away from the people that beat them, none of them looked like themselves in that loss. True. Taira looked weirdly flat in his loss. Albazi definitely looked weirdly flat in his. And Almabayev, you know, like we've just spent 15 minutes running down. If this is the real Almabayev, he's been doing a good job of hiding it for 8 years and 17 straight fights. So, I'd be good with that as well. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on to the rest of this card?
No, there's really not a lot to uncover with this one. Almabayev didn't give his best. Kape looked good. He looked good, but there was something
the
missing.
Kind of performance from Kape that should have been rewarded with a clean knockout or a dominant decision. Because, like I say, reffing gaffes like that shortchange the winning fighter as much as the losing one sometimes.
Very true.
Kape, I'm going to have that asterisk in my mind every time Kape fights, for at least the next few fights. South of that, I'm going to be honest and say this was a lean card, even by the standards of a free fight night card a week before a massive pay-per-view. I mean, when the UFC has cut it down to two analysts and one ring card girl, you know it's they're skimping. But the co-main event, the rarity of a co-main event featuring two fighters who were both under 500 in the UFC going into it. It is former teammates Cody Brundage and Julian Marquez fighting for the title of the ultimate, just another guy in the UFC middleweight division. But for all 3 minutes, It was 4 and change for
Yeah.
all of 4 minutes and change. It was a whole hell of a lot of fun. It told a whole story, the entire sweep of human emotion, the triumph, the tragedy, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Is that the first time you've ever seen both fighters lose their mouthpieces at the same time in a mixed martial or any combat sports contest?
There's a good chance that I've seen it before, but nothing else is coming to mind. It seems like one of those things that you would think has happened frequently, but I can't think of it.
Well, I'm guessing that Mark Smith has never seen it before because he reacted absolutely the wrong way.
Yeah. No, he was terrible with regards to that. And what makes it worse is Dom Cruz was complimenting him on that.
Come on, Dom. Here's the thing. Ultimately, the refs have a long list of duties and a complicated job, but it breaks down to protect the fighters, enforce the rules, and don't insert yourself into the story of the fight any more than you absolutely have to in order to accomplish point 1 and point 2.
Yes.
Like, if one fighter, let alone both fighters, lose their mouth guard, you're going to need to give them their mouth guard back at some point in order to keep with your prime directive, which is protect the fighters. But there's a time and a place, and here we had a violent fight with violent swings of momentum, and his 5-second pause to give them back their mouth guards blunted one guy's momentum and allowed the other guy to take over afterwards. Like, it changed the course of the fight. And I'm not saying that wouldn't have happened anyway, because this was very much a defense optional slugfest. This was about the most light heavyweight, like middleweight fight I've ever seen. But you know what? How can I be that mad at this? Because the best we could possibly get out of this fight was a violent slobber knocker, and we got that. I don't know, man.
I'm not mad at the fight itself. It was a lot of fun, It takes me back to like Leonard Garcia and whoever the hell else he would fight. Just flinking ham hocks around. It was a lot of fun. So I'm not going to crap on that. I feel like the outcome was affected one way or another by Smith inserting himself, and so that was the real bummer, because Marquez came out to swing. He went out on his shield, and I want to give him all the credit in the world, but I also can't help but think, what if and that's the problem. I'm not saying Brundage wouldn't have won otherwise, but we don't know.
You know what would have happened though? Like, without that timeout for the mouthpiece, it probably makes it to the end of the first round. They both come out gassed, and we get 2 more rounds that are just absolutely terrible. Like, maybe Mark Smith did us all a favor. I have no idea. I'm limited in how analytical I want to get on this fight.
Yeah, that's fair.
With all due respect to these guys, because clearly it meant a lot to them. Like, Cody Brundage was in tears afterwards. But in the greater picture of the division, this was about as meaningless as it gets.
Oh yeah.
Again, it's 2 guys that were under 500 in the UFC coming into this fight and are over 30. It's just a matter of which guy was going to get to stick around and give us fun slugfest for a while longer, and that looks like Brundage.
And that was our co-main event. Ay, caramba.
That was our co-main event. Before that, we had, at the very least, a candidate for fight of the night, as Nasrat Haqparast and Esteban Rubovics slugged it out. And John Anik, and by the way, John Anik might be my all-time favorite MMA play-by-play announcer. Like, so this is not a general criticism of him, but he said the quiet part out loud during this fight, as these guys were putting on a sensational brawl. He says, imagine if this was in like a packed arena. Yeah, this is why cards at the Apex suck.
Not just that, but this is the quality of card that they'll give us at the Apex when you have Julian Marquez and Cody Brundage in the co-main event. They know that that's not going to sell tickets, so they know they can get away with that. That's why we want them to get away from the Apex.
I don't know whether Esteban Ribovics is a former or is a future contender at 155 pounds. I don't know if he'll still be in the UFC 2 years from now. I suspect the answer to the first question is no, and the second question is yes. But what should be set in stone after tonight is that he never fights in an empty TV studio again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't know if he can become a future contender, but given his current trajectory, I think he could very easily settle into a role similar to Drew Dober. Just, the constant action fighting guy that the UFC loves to put in front of people. And, he completely lived up to that tonight. What did you think of the decision anyway?
I scored it for Ribovics. I gave him the second and third rounds.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
But I'm not mad at the splitter necessarily. Like I thought all 3 rounds were pretty competitive. Bob Timpson in the chat is, it's a shame. It's a shame that Keith isn't here, because just saying how badly Brundage would wipe out Bo Nickel if they if they linked it up would definitely get would definitely get Keith. Nazarat's face was all screwed up, says Marcus Mustard. Yes, it certainly was. By the look at his face, now look at mine standard, which unfortunately is not how actual MMA fights are judged. Ribovics wins, no question. It was the kind of fight that did not leave me feeling worse about either guy. It is a hard road to break into the top 10 in the UFC's 145, 155, or 170 pound divisions. It's possible to win 5 or 6 fights in a row and not even be on the cusp yet. So, and Haqparast has been kind of close, but yeah, this wasn't a fight for a spot on the rankings, but it's one that made me think that either of them could win a few fights in a row at the right time and kind of sneak into that range.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know that Haqparast was calling for a numbered opponent next. I don't think he quite gets it quite yet. I think there has already been some discussion with regards to the decision, which is why I asked you about that. I saw some people calling it a robbery, which too strong of a word if you ask me. I disagree with the decision, but not a robbery. But yeah.
Yeah. Every decision I disagree with is not a robbery. I'm looking at MMA decisions, and they actually don't have that scorecard on there. Our man in Halifax, Nova Scotia, looks like he might have taken off after the undercard. So I don't know how we all scored that. Before that, another splitter right before was the featherweight matchup between Haider Emil and William Gomes. I know how you scored this one, because you were one of Sherdog's official scorers. You scored it for Gomes, giving Emil just the third round. The swing round there was pretty clearly the second round.
Oh, yeah.
In the chat, hey, what's up, Stacks? Let us know how you scored the Haider Emil versus William Gomes fight.
Yeah, I thought that one was closer than Haqparast and Ribovics. I felt pretty confident with my Ribovics score. It didn't go that way, but again, whereas Emil and Gomi, I really thought that was just a coin flip. That really could have gone either way. That second round was incredibly close.
And I owned up on the preview to having underestimated. I don't think I underestimated Haider Emil, but kind of short sold his upside just as a guy in a lighter weight class who came to the UFC at age 33. But, he blistered his first 2 opponents inside of a round and really looked close to flawless in doing so. Tonight, whether you scored the fight for Emil or not, you can see the shortcomings that will form his ceiling in this division. I think, it turns out that when he's, in front of an opponent that is aware of kind of the range battle, Emil is hittable. Like, Gomes tagged him up a lot, and He was successful at various points in the fight at kind of stopping Emil from getting inside and just unloading long combinations in the pocket. Like still a solid performance by Emil, but considering how many patient, hard-hitting counter strikers there are kind of in the top 15 at 145 pounds, I think I've seen Emil's ceiling, but I'd be happy to continue to be surprised here.
Yeah, no, he's another one of those that I would say is kind of in the Dober mold, just a different weight class for this one. But I'll flat out say it. I short sold him and underestimated him. I thought he was probably maybe he'll win a fight or two, but he'll probably wash out within 2-3 years, something like that. But he's completely proven me wrong with regards to that, and obviously I'm happy to have that happen. But he's there to be hit. Gomi landed on him plenty, and when if he gets to the top 15, there's going to be guys that hit harder and are a little bit more defensively conscientious than Gomi. And I'm with you. I think Emil's got a hard ceiling, but I'm here to watch his fights. He's a hell of a lot of fun.
That he definitely is. Before that was our main card opener. I mean, for what that's worth, considering it's all on the same channel. The battle of impossibly tall, lanky welterweights in the form of Danny Barlow and Sam Patterson. Danny Barlow's nickname is Left Hand to God. Sam Patterson used his right hand to send Danny Barlow to see God, if however briefly. I did not have that on my bingo card. Well, for one, I had Barlow by knockout on this one. I said it on the preview. Like, Barlow's not a perfect fighter, but he hits stupid hard, has really good hand speed, and Sam Patterson fills the entire checklist of tall man striking defense mistakes. Having said that, like, fair play to Patterson. He was kind of homing in on Barlow throughout. I mean, the whole fight was only 3 minutes long, but you could see Patterson going from being put on his heels and like, if anything, a little shook by the speed and power of Barlow to, okay, I'm starting to get this, to, like, you could almost see just like the radar crosshairs for like an orbital strike just starting to kind of home in on Barlow's face. Fair play to Patterson. I still think for however long he sticks around in the UFC, most of his best wins are going to be either by submission or workman-like kind of ground fighting specials. But make no mistake, he's got that tall man power.
Yeah.
Anything stand out to you from this 3 minutes of work? Anything surprise you aside from the outcome itself?
Not particularly. I can say that I think moving up to 170 was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to him, because holy crap, how that guy ever made it to 155, I'll never understand, because he's tall for a welterweight. He was absolutely ginormous for a lightweight, but I don't think he had any water left in him by the time he finished that weight cut. So
no, yeah, 170 seems like a good place for him.
Yeah, but he's not facing guys that are as quick, so I think that's to his advantage. He's still a little bit short on the wrestling, but he's a skilled grappler. I thought that was the one advantage that he would have over Barlow, but he didn't even need to exploit that. So it shows that the time he's been putting in at his gym, it's paying off. He's growing as a fighter, and he's relying on his smarts, because he's not a great athlete. I think he knows that. It doesn't mean he's not working on it. I heard him say that, but he's done better than I expected.
Yes, better than I expected, as Bobby Boucher puts it. I'm sure he meant surprises, but I'm going to read it verbatim. One of the most pleasant sunrises of the last year or so since moving up, 3 first-round finishes. Yeah.
Well, we got to give Bobby Boucher some leeway. He's got that accent, and
yeah.
He's also got to unlearn what he's got to unlearn. Yeah, he's got to unlearn what Mama said too. So,
yeah. In the top prelim, I feel bad for Austin Lane, Because on the one hand, I thought he actually looked as good as he has during his entire UFC run. And it still ended up with him getting not just knocked out, but astral traveling knocked out. But through about 5 minutes of this fight, he was doing just about everything right. Like, he looked pretty good. And then it didn't matter.
I want to give Dev a lot of credit because this is something that he said on our backdoor chat in our Sherdog stack, but he was saying that yep, exactly right there, all the damage that he accrued through his NFL career, and I think that's true with a lot of them because we were discussing it, and you said the only guy who came from the NFL that you can think of that had a solid chin was Matt Mitrione. And I, going through it in my head, we had others like Greg Hardy. Oh God, who else?
I mean, shout out to those old school enough to remember Johnny Morton at K1 Dynamite USA, which that still might be the most knocked out I've ever seen a human being in a professional mixed martial arts contest. And that wasn't even heavyweight. Like, he's a former slot receiver. I think he weighed like 190 pounds for that fight. But yeah, like Matt Mitrione had a ridiculously rugged beard. Most of your other former NFL types, not so much.
You could even count college too, though, because at one point Matt Semmelsberger had a chin, and all of a sudden it was gone. Dominic Reyes seems to be doing okay now, but for a little while there, you just had to blow on him, and he was getting knocked out. It seemed.
Yeah. MMA racks. This is an interesting point. Kind of crazy. Lane came out of the corner swinging and eager to trade, given he fought an almost perfect first round. I hesitate to psychoanalyze athletes, but from the outward appearances, it looked like he was kind of feeling himself after having a good first round, and maybe thought he was going to try to get something for the highlight reel. He succeeded in doing that. It just wasn't his highlight reel. It's heavyweight, man. Almost everybody has power. Pinto clearly has power. Lane coulda, shoulda just rinsed and repeated. Because not only had he had a good first round, but Pinto was looking kind of frustrated at the end of that round. You know, like, and again, this is me being an unqualified armchair psychoanalyst, but if he does that same thing again for the second round, maybe Pinto gets frustrated enough to go on full tilt, and then Lane could get his highlight reel knockout like in the last round. But yeah, instead he came right out, turned into old bad Austin Lane, and got lamped in 30 seconds of that second round. And dude, that was very, very knocked out.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is heavyweight's not, it's not quite light heavyweight in terms of MMA IQ, but heavyweight's not full of guys that are notorious for being smart fighters. So, I feel like Lane had a, pardon the pun, lane to be able to find success within the UFC. And we'll see if he's on the cut list after this, but, he might have done himself in with that.
Might have. And good thing about getting knocked out like that is he's the only person that did not hear Mario Pinto say bing bang bosh 3 times in like 90 seconds. Good on Lane versus Huggy Bear. Bobby Boucher wants that just for the hilarious look at the, ceremonial weigh-ins.
Well, the best would have been Stefan Struve and Huggy Bear.
Yeah, I mean, we got close to that when Struve fought Pat Barry,
Yes.
who was, but yeah, before that, if there was a fight that did not deserve to be on the prelims, did not deserve to be before that co-main event at all, maybe it's Jose Mariscal versus Ricardo Ramos. Answer me this, and if you're watching in the chat right now, answer me this: how good is Chepe Mariscal? Answer me, because I don't know. Dayne Fox, how good is Chepe?
He is. Oh man, that's a brilliant question because that's a really hard one to answer. Like, I never would have guessed that he would be 5-0 when he got signed to the UFC, but here we are with Kape Mariscal sitting at 5-0. I will say that, funny enough, I do think that he kind of took a step backwards in the level of competition when he got Ramos for this fight. But still, he's relatively on the same line of what he has been fighting, so it's not like it was a massive shock or anything like that they got booked. But I would say he's just outside the top 15, but he's been winning well enough that he probably deserves a crack at somebody with a number next to their name.
I'm kind of with you on that. He's been a pleasant surprise for a guy that took the scenic route through seemingly every regional promotion in North America to get to the UFC. He has exceeded those expectations, because the thing about fighters like that, again, they don't come to the UFC until they're 30 or pushing 30 and already have 25 career fights, is if you follow regional MMA as closely as I do, or you do, or a lot of people in this chat probably do, you've seen them lose on the way up, and it's hard to get that excited about them, because you're like, oh yeah, I remember when he lost a lousy fight to a lousy fighter in CFFC 8 years ago. For him to come out kind of this fully formed, the only other person in recent memory that it reminds me of is Chris Curtis, where I'm like, oh, the UFC signed Chris Curtis. That'll be fun for a minute, but I saw this guy retire twice in the same night back in PFL. This won't last long, and he's carved out a nice kind of career arc for himself. Mariscal is on that tip, and something I liked tonight was Mariscal has been a blood and guts guy since he got to the UFC. Like, he's all of his fights have been super exciting. He's gotten rung up. His opponents have gotten rung up, and here he was fighting someone in Ramos where I thought the line was a little disrespectful, but Ramos's best routes to victory were to catch Mariscal with a huge single punch and either finish him that way or catch him with a huge punch, like pancake a desperation takedown and choke him out. Like, Ramos's best routes to victory were going to be some sort of lightning strike offense. And so it was nice to see Mariscal work a game plan where he remained aggressive, but still remained like relatively sound defensively and in control of the fight against the guy that kind of needed Mariscal to make a mistake in order to have his best routes to victory. So this was the kind of performance that makes me want to see Mariscal ply his trade against a top 15 type fighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that what you've got him booked against next?
Shit, I looked at a bunch of names and I forgot to put any of them down. But yes, I had a couple of names of kind of fringe, either fringe top 10 guys coming off a loss or fringe top 15 guys coming off a win. Was the type of fighter I had him for. Or a fellow up and comer like a Steve Garcia type that's on a nice little stretch. And if they fight, whoever wins that fight is probably in the top 15. And how would that fight be anything but insanely good?
Yeah, Garcia is exactly who I had. Just, and I thought, what, it's two guys that are overachieving at this point. When they were signed, like you said, we'd seen them lose on the regional scene. Didn't think that they were going to hang around for very long. But, damn it, if they haven't hung around and put together 5-fight win streaks, and Garcia's knocked out everybody along the way. I don't know if he can knock out Mariscal, because holy crap, that guy's got a hell of a chin. He ate a couple of those spinning attacks from Ramos.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Bobby Boucher likes him versus Dan Ige. Ige is scheduled to fight Sean Woodson.
Yes. Up
soon, but one half of that fight, whoever wins or whoever loses, I'd be a-okay with that. Bob Chimpson is picking apart Mariscal's UFC record. Like, I am a-okay with that. He's ranting.
For the record, Bob Chimpson, Sean Soriano, it hasn't been 10 years since he won a UFC fight. He never won a UFC fight, so.
It has been infinity years. Yep, it has been, yeah. Before that, Danny Puma Silva versus Lucas Almeida in a catchweight affair. You know what, Almeida, you're a big dude. You might be too big for featherweight. I don't know. Silva picks up a split decision over Almeida. I scored it 29-28 Silva, same as you did. Like I gave Silva the first 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see the potential for the splitter. I thought each of the 3 rounds individually was pretty clear cut. Tell me if you feel differently.
No, that was exactly how I thought. I was a little bit surprised by that myself, but you always get scores like that. And I'll be honest with you, there's been a couple of times where I've scored a fight that everybody was asking me what the hell I was looking at. And I will be honest, 9 times out of 10, if I go back and rewatch it, it's like, oh yeah, I completely missed something there. So it happens. It happens, but yeah.
Marcus Mustard, happy to be the voice of dissent here. He thought Almeida won round 2 and 3. So on rewatch, and if I'm being honest, I probably won't rewatch this fight until one of these 2 guys is up to fight again, and I'm rewatching it as tape study. But I will leave myself a note to pay special attention to round 2. Welcome, Paul Vivrette. I think you may be new to the chat. If so, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. We are ripping through this card because
who the hell wants to talk about it?
Hey, well, let's talk about JJ Aldrich versus Andrea Lee. In my pre-event column, I felt a little bad for making fun of Lee, but at this point, I mean, she came into this fight having lost 5 in a row. Why does she still have a job? I said, at this point, it's like Sam Alvey with a worse losing streak and a better smile. Now that losing streak stands at 6. Having said that, I mean, the tough thing with Lee, I mean, you can come up with snarky reasons why she's still in the UFC after 4 or 5, now 6 straight losses. But it's hard to take one fight and be like, okay, this is the one, she's gone, because she tends to be competitive in defeat. These women are not just like, knocking her out of her sneakers. And it's women's flyweight, which is a perpetually threadbare division. So if you don't have an Andrea Lee to throw against the Macy Barbers or JJ Aldriches of the world, who are you going to replace her with? It's not like we have a ton of real promising women's flyweights coming up on the Contender Series. Like there's a reason why she was able to stick around this long. How do you feel about Aldrich?
Oh, God. Aldrich is the consummate professional. Always, you can tell that she's worked her ass off to try to get better because, she was one of the least exciting prospects on that season of Tough. But she's managed to not just make it onto the UFC roster from there, but she has managed to hang around. And holy shit, that was her 10th UFC win. I never would have predicted that at that point. But she's almost like a female version of Chepe. She's just very gritty, willing to go to hell to try to get the win. Fortunately, because there's not the same athletic type of fighters in women's flyweight that there are in featherweight or lightweight. She's not going through those same type of hellish contests that Chepe does. But if it comes down to it, she absolutely will. I have no doubt about that. But she's one of those that I don't want to call her an overachiever because that kind of feels disrespectful. But I can't think of a better word for that.
Right. I'm 100% on board with that. She's completely an overachiever. And I think women's flyweight has traditionally been a division where hard-nosed, overachieving women can kind of stick around. I mean, Roxanne Modafferi's whole final act of her career came after she dropped the flyweight, and all of a sudden she was only slower than her opponent. She wasn't slower and weaker. Only at women's flyweight, I think, do we get a JJ Aldrich in the modern UFC. Because I remember when the UFC signed her, I was like, well, that's interesting, but she was about the 3rd best strawweight in Invicta. I don't get this. But no, she's gradually, steadily improved her skills. And you said this about Sam Patterson a little earlier on the show, where he's not a great athlete, but he's working to improve on that. And I think it's improve on it and find workarounds. Like, it is possible to be a successful striker in MMA, even if you have slower hand speed than your opponents.
Yep.
You know, it's just, you have to do different things. Like, you have to get more diligent about throwing in combination. If you can't land first, then you need to land second, third, and fourth. You know, like that's the way to circumvent superior hand speed, is throwing cleaner combinations. She's become a better boxer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't think she's become a markedly better athlete. She's just gotten better at coming up with a striking game that works for her particular natural gifts.
She's one of those who has very much benefited from her training partner, because, you know, she works frequently with Rose Namajunas, and so she's regularly facing one of the better athletes in women's MMA. So she understands what she needs to do to compensate for that.
Yeah, I mean, someone in Namajunas who, on the right day, you can make an argument that she might be the best striker and the best grappler in her division.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's 11 fights down. We're down to the curtain jerker. The curtain was jerked
9
by Charles Johnson and Ramazanbek Temirov. I believe you were kind of foremost among the voices criticizing Charles Johnson's haircut on in the Sherdog Slack chat. I will hear no such slander. I mean, he has those huge Olympic rings tattooed on his back.
Yes.
I'm not an expert on steeplechase, but apparently training for steeplechase must involve something where you're winning a race with your hair, because he's just been gradually winning a race with his hair for the 5 years or so he's been in the UFC. It used to be kind of a mullet, and it's just turning into this little patch, like right in the back. He's just, if you did a time lapse, he's just like pulling ahead of his hair like 1 inch per year. At least it is now black instead of green.
Yes.
You scored this fight for Temirov.
Yeah.
In fact, you gave Temirov the first and second rounds, gave Johnson the third.
Yes.
I'm not mad at that, but I don't feel off the charts better about Temirov as a prospect. And that's even after picking this fight wrong. Like, I figured Johnson would jump up, and at the time we did the preview, he was a slight underdog. It was a pick'em by the time they walked into the cage. But Johnson had gotten really good at managing the distance against faster, stocky fighters that knew they needed to crash the phone booth. Oh, Bob Chimpson. Amidst all the noise, Bob Chimpson does spit some bars occasionally. Charles Johnson is an underachiever, and he gives us the specifics. In all of his losses, you always come out thinking he could have done more. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
Yeah. You know, every now and then the troll gets something true in there.
Yeah. And just the fact, and this wasn't the only fight tonight where this happened, but where Johnson just seemed to kind of turn up the jets late in the fight and took over at that point. It does make you go, well, what if he had done that a round earlier? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's no question of who had the momentum by the end. But yeah, just seemed like a fight where Johnson never really got out of second gear. And who knows? Maybe Temirov would beat the best version of Charles Johnson as well. Like, I'm trying not to be salty just because I got the pick wrong. But yeah, neither guy showed me a ton. There you go. That is probably the fastest you will ever hear the Sherdog recap show rip through an entire card. But 1, it was only 10 fights. 2, most of them were just not that big. So we went through them as quickly as possible. Let's get to the fun stuff. And let's talk first about... Let's talk about the awards first, if we may.
Right.
We have awards. We have a fight of the night, and we have 2 performances of the night. If you're watching this, and you probably already know who actually won the awards, so rather than guess, just let us know whom you would give the fight of the night and performance of the night bonuses to, if it were up to you, if you were the one handing out the checks. I will say that I agree with the fight of the night, and I agree with one performance of the night, and the other I strongly disagree with.
I don't know, so I'll throw out a couple of guesses. I'll guess that one of the performances went to Pinto.
You'd be correct. Mario Pinto is one of your performance of the night winners, and I think that's perfectly
agreed.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'd probably give the second one to Patterson, but if you're disagreeing, I'm guessing probably not that one.
I would have given it to Patterson.
Okay, yes. So we're in agreement there. We're in agreement. So that means it wasn't Patterson. Was it? Please tell me it wasn't Kape.
Your fight of the night is Nasrat Haqparast versus Esteban Ribovics. Your performances of the night are Mario Pinto for his second round knockout of Austin Lane and Manel Kape for multiple uncalled eye pokes against Asu Almabayev. Like, how can you give somebody a performance of the night when the finish didn't even involve strikes? Mike Beltran literally interposed himself because Almabayev had turned his back and started to run. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that would have been called that'd be called 100 times out of 100 in boxing. You don't always get it in MMA because, there are other routes to victory in MMA than just, squaring up and punching the other guy. But yeah, that goes down in the Sherdog Fight Finder as a TKO via retirement. Like, there were no punches thrown within like 5 seconds of the finish. How you could give a guy a bonus check for that just boggles the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And had they given fight of the night to Gomi and Amil, I wouldn't have been upset either. But I agree that Haqparast and Ribovics was more deserving.
Yeah. MMA Racks, giving Kape the performance bonus over Patterson is insane. Completely agree. Yeah. Patterson got a first round knockout of a knockout artist, and it was good stuff. This seems to me to be a no-brainer. I'm
Well, I'll throw this out there. Had they given it to Brundage over Kape, I would have been okay. I disagree, but that would have made more sense than giving it to Kape.
And here's the thing: Kape was fighting for a title shot. Cody Brundage is fighting for bonuses.
Yep.
Like the whole reason Brundage and Marquez are even in the UFC right now is to put over the Bo Nichols of the world, or if you're going to make them fight each other, hopefully one or both of them get a $50,000 check out of it. Like, that's literally what they're there for. If Brundage knocks out Julian Marquez in your co-main event, give the man a check. Manel Kape was fighting for more than that. Yeah.
Disappointing, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Eric Fursick says Pinto KO, good highlight. Yeah. Good highlight. And yeah, not much else you can say about that. Let's do the cut list. I think everybody watching right now is familiar, but the cut list, Dane and I will take the reins. Clearly, the UFC needs the help. We will take the job of Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard, Hunter Campbell, Dana White, and we will cut any fighters who need cutting. It's part of the circle of life. There's Dana White's Contender Series every season. That is 100 to 120 new fighters. 50 or 60 of them are going to get contracts. Somebody got to make room. How many people are on your cut list, Dayne Fox?
I have 3. How about yourself?
Let's see. Cut list. I got 1. I got 2. I think I have 4. So here, let's see who gets saved. I am cutting bait on that up and coming prospect Andrea Lee. After having lost 6 straight fights in the UFC, I'm gonna say like it's time. It's time.
I've got her on the list too. Yes.
Okay. I've got Austin Lane on mine.
He's on my cut list too. Yes.
Like, Lane has lost 3 of his last 4. He's lost 3 or 4 in the UFC, and the one win was over Rebellis Despain, who it turned out had the worst takedown defense literally in the modern history of the UFC.
Not to mention the worst ground game overall. I mean, holy crap, he just laid there.
Yeah, So one of the two people, I'm either going to have to convince you, or they're getting saved. I am letting go of Julian Marquez. He has now lost 4 straight fights. It has been almost 4 years since he won a fight in the UFC. The last time he won a fight over someone that is still in the UFC was August of 20. Actually, he never has. He is 3-5 in the UFC, and all 3 of his wins are over people who have subsequently been cut. Is Julian Marquez?
I've got him. I've got him on there. I'm sad to do it because holy shit, he came out to fight tonight, but 4 in a row, and middleweight's getting crowded. He's got to go.
I was going to cut Lucas Almeida.
That's who I figured it was.
He's lost 3 of 4, and he blew weight.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, yeah, no, if he blew weight, yeah, let's cut him. I forgot about that. Yeah, no, I'll put him on my list for that.
All right, there's your cut list. 4 fighters, making plenty of room for the next generation of up-and-comers. Let's do Bulls and Bears.
Okay.
What do you want to do first, Bulls or Bears?
Let's do the Bulls first. We'll have you go first.
All right, Bulls. These are things, of course, whose stock is up after UFC Vegas 103. I'm going to throw out Sam Patterson. He was an underdog in this fight, and beyond just cashing as the underdog, he won in kind of an unexpected way, and a way that is going to make his next opponent have to study the tape a little bit harder. Like, he's the one that said in his own post-fight interview, I'm not this one-dimensional grappler. And for him to say that after a performance where, again, he cold-cocked a knockout artist, I don't think any 6'4" welterweight is going to make it past the murderer's row of wrestlers that are up there. But he just bought himself a serious lease on life. So he's one of my bulls. Bull number 2, Mario Pinto. Yes, it would have been more sensational if he had knocked out Austin Lane at 40 seconds of the first round, which honestly, that was more or less my pick. I thought he was going to flatten Lane, in the first half of the first round. But to see him in a fight against an actual resisting opponent and, have to get hit a few times, have to get his hands on somebody that is every bit as big as him and maybe stronger. And yeah, it took Austin Lane making a horrible tactical choice for him to get the finish, but this kind of performance will improve Pinto's game more than 5 more of the just ridiculous first round knockouts he got on the way up. Like he needs to face some adversity. So if you can face that adversity and make adjustments and feel what it's like to be losing a fight while still having your hand raised at the end, that's not a bad place to be. So stock up for Mario Pinto.
Does so much for your confidence too. You can, like I've been here, I can come back from that. So yeah, no, that's always fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant myself. I thought that was brilliant.
Stock up. Third one I'll throw out is Haider Emil. Close fight that could reasonably have been judged either way, but for a guy in Emil that, again, he's 34 years old in a division that is traditionally not very kind to the elderly, it's good to know that he is going to be good for something more than just first round knockouts of guys that can't defend themselves very well on the feet. Like, knowing what we now know about Haider Emil and what he's good at, you couldn't have given him 2 more tailor-made opponents to start off his UFC run than Fernie Garcia and Sungwoo Choi. 2 guys that never saw a, chin up, hands down brawl they didn't want to get into. Like, those guys were perfectly tailored for Haider Emil to tee off on. William Gomez was perfectly tailored, if Emil wasn't the real deal, to just completely frustrate him for 3 rounds and derail like the hype train badly. But instead, Emil showed adaptability, he showed toughness, and he got, at least in my eyes, a well-deserved split decision. he's definitely becoming a person of interest for however long this fun lasts. What do you got on your Bulls list?
A lot of the what you said, I had as well. So I will throw out one other one that I think certainly deserves some recognition, and it's piggybacking on what Paul Vivrette was saying. I think Ribovic's stock went up more than Haqparast from that fight. That's not to say Haqparast didn't go up, but I think Ribovic's was the one that just really took the fight to him, made it a blood and guts war. He's the younger fighter. I think he's the less polished fighter as well. So he may have more upside than Haqparast. I can't say for sure, but regardless, I think that he's very much establishing himself as a fan favorite at this point, even in a loss.
Garrett Clemens, thanks for dropping by. Hopefully the Tank fight is unbelievable. Bears. These are things whose stock is down. Do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Bears Apex shows. I really think that, the lackluster of this card, whether it's on paper or the product that it was put out. That's not to say that there weren't a couple of bangers of fights, but for the most part, the card was very flat. And I know that there's flat cards in front of a live audience,
sure,
but yeah, it seems like the proportion of flat cards to at the Apex compared to what it is with the live shows. Yeah, it seems to be a lot heavier on the Apex shows. They say that they want to move away from it. I'm not seeing any signs of that because they keep booking them. I'm praying that they do it soon.
I would love it if they did as well, because even if the fights deliver, it's not the same experience.
Yeah,
it's like the difference between eating a slice of apple pie off a paper plate and eating another slice of the same pie off of china. Like the expectations are different because of the setting. Like,
yeah,
when you walk into an arena for a UFC card, or hell, for a local card, like if I go to a Fury Fighting Championship card down here in Houston in a hotel ballroom with 1,500 people in it, when the people are going nuts, like, it elevates your expectations. Like, it whets your appetite for what you're about to witness. And a lot of them will say they don't feel it, but the fighters feel it too.
Well, beyond that too, it cheats the fans. Like, people talk about how there's not that many NFL games. Let's stop and think about this. There can be up to 16 NFL games where there are 60,000 people in the stands in a week. Over the course of, they play 17 games and there's the playoffs.
Yeah.
The UFC runs one card a week. Occasionally they'll run two, but at this point it's once in a blue moon. But regardless, that's generally about 20,000 people that get to see a live UFC event a week.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, with the NFL, that's 60,000 over potentially 16 games. The NBA, they've got 82 games. Baseball, there's 162 games. For the fans' sake, the UFC needs to get their ass back out on the road full time and avoid the Apex.
And I mean, I don't know how much like live coverage you've done of cards, but pretty much every time I've been on press row for a UFC event, you go to the you go to the post-fight presser in the bowels of the stadium afterwards. And the first thing out of Dana's mouth is the attendance record or the gate record they just set. Like, two things can't be true at the same time. Like,
yeah.
If they are that smashing a success, then why do you tape your fight nights in a TV studio with 200 people in it? Yeah, but was that your final bear, or did you have?
No, that was actually my first one.
Right.
But it's this card really exemplified the problem with it. But anyway, number two, second week in a row, referees. I think Beltran dropped the ball with how he handled the eye pokes. And we also talked about how Mark Smith dropped the ball with the mouth guards. That just completely ruined the momentum of that fight. So, something's there needs to be more clarity with the referees, in my opinion. Like, there's the obvious debate of, hey, when do they take a point? It's like, okay, either I'm of the opinion of either they get one warning and then no matter what the foul is after that, take a point, or just start taking the point right away. Because, in the NBA, it doesn't matter if it's an accident, you get penalized. NFL, doesn't matter if it's an accident, you get penalized. MMA fighters know that they can get away with breaking the rules, so I have no doubt that they're taking advantage of that. So anyway, just my little spiel. And number 2, Asu Almabayev. This was his first opportunity with the spotlight on him. Came out looking flat. I would have had Manel Kape as a bull, but I don't like to have a bull and a bear opposite of each other, and I gave the bear slot to Almabayev. So, yeah.
I completely agree with all those. I'm not going to pile 3 more on top of that. Like, I just wanted to make sure we got to Almabayev because it's not a good look when who knows how long they're going to replay footage of you just like literally turning tail and running from your opponent at the end of a fight. That's going to be, that's going to take him a while to get past. Only thing I'll add on top of that, and I will go bear on one side, bull on the other. Danny Barlow. I didn't have him down as a future, contender necessarily in this division, but I thought he had more upside than Patterson did. And again, I figured this was about as tailor-made a matchup for him as possible. A guy that's a good submission artist, but doesn't have good offensive wrestling and is super tall and just keeps his chin straight up in the air. And for about a minute, it looked like Barlow was going to waste him. And instead he ended up getting knocked out. So it's a step back for him. He'll get more chances, but this was definitely a stock down moment. Like if he had lamped Patterson, he's probably out of the Apex rotation and he's fighting on arena cards after this.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to think what else. Keith normally runs the agenda. Dude, seriously, have you got any? I always forget to write them down.
I've got a couple. I already mentioned one of them, so I'm going to throw it out there really quick. Cruz complimenting Mark Smith on the mouthpiece reset. I heard as soon as that happened, I'm like, oh man, that was terrible. Mark Smith, what the hell are you doing? And then 5 seconds later, I hear Dominic Cruz. Yeah, great job by Mark Smith stopping the action to give him their mouthpiece. No, you. But dude, seriously, Dom. To balance it out, though, I will give Dom a good dude. Seriously, John Anik mentioned in the commentary that he goes over to Dom's house and he catches him watching fights in Spanish so Dom can learn Spanish. That's one of those, dude. Seriously, that's pretty cool, actually. On Dominic Cruz, consummate professional, always trying to do better. I mean, we love to tease him for being as salty as it gets, but that actually is pretty cool for him to be doing.
Yeah, and he announced his retirement, like a month or 2 ago, but they gave him like a little special moment at the Apex on an Apex card. Like it really does a disservice to everybody. It would be a whole podcast on its own, but huge props to Dominic Cruz, who is, I mean, still you can make a good case for him as one of the 15 or 20 greatest fighters ever. You can make a good case for him as maybe still the greatest ever in his weight class. And that is despite multiple 2, 3, 4-year injury layoffs. Like, he is probably the greatest what-if story, like injury what-if story in MMA history.
Yeah, the fact that he could be both the greatest bantamweight and the greatest what-if, that's nuts.
Like unbelievable. Like for me, despite everything he accomplished, if he had been there that whole time, like even if he'd lost a few, but like racked up who knows how many more wins, I think he could have made it like he might have been like a Mount Rushmore guy. We might be talking about like, GSP, Anderson Silva, Fedor, like, Dominic Cruz up there. Like it might be more of like a Demetrius Johnson type thing where you remember for like 4 years in a row, like nobody could lay a finger on Dominic Cruz. Well, that's true, but it's only because Cruz was out injured for 4 years in a row. Like, yeah. Yeah, so dude seriously on both sides for Dominic Cruz. Any other dude seriouslys?
I noticed that the UFC listed Andrea Lee's record when she's the favorite. She was the underdog going into that fight. What the hell were they? That made no sense to list that.
She was a substantial underdog going into it. She was like a 2-1 underdog. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I threw that out there, and Jay Petrie was just like, again, they don't care.
If the UFC gave 6 of its 7 ring card girls and 6 of its 8 desk analysts the night off, think of what happens to the unpaid interns that are putting those things up on your screen. Yeah.
And then one more. Well, I'll throw out Vivretti. He also threw out that giving Cruz the send off, but we kind of already touched on that. I don't know if that was necessarily something that we mentioned as a legit dude seriously, because you can't even have Dominic get his Hall of Fame send off in an arena. You got to do it in the Apex. Another reason why they need to get out of the Apex.
Yeah.
And I had one other one. Like I said, this one I was confused on. Maybe somebody can help clarify what he was saying. But Hyder Emil says he beat the guy who beat the guy who's fighting for the belt. I don't remember William Gomi beating Diego Lopez. What is he talking about?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, he didn't say what belt. Did he mean like the Aries FC belt?
That's a possibility, but
good on Hyder for keeping track of European regional MMA.
Yeah, no, we're watching the UFC, so when I hear beat the guy who's fighting for the belt, I only think of one belt. So don't get me wrong, I know there's one, but we're at the tip top of the Teton with this one, so I don't know.
I got one dude seriously.
Cool.
In cage Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belt promotions, like, they're kind of cringy under the best of circumstances, but giving them out after a fight that had essentially no jiu-jitsu is extra weird.
Oh yeah.
Like, I said this in the Sherdog chat. I'm good with one in-cage promotion in UFC history, and that's Frank Mir getting his black belt from Roberto Pires after breaking his second opponent's arm in the cage. Like Tim Sylvia, breaking the arm of a three-time Mundials winner in Roberto Traven wasn't enough. He had to break 2 people's arms, then you get your black belt. I'm A-okay with that. If they'd given him like an extra stripe after breaking Big Nog's arm, I would have been good with that too. But giving someone a jiu-jitsu belt promotion after a fight with no grappling just seems silly,
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Who is your listener of the night?
There were actually a couple that I thought were really good. MMA Rex had a couple of really good comments I liked. So I was highly considering that, but I'll go with Bobby Boucher.
I can't go wrong with Bobby. Like, I need to basically disqualify him from consideration. He's a Hall of Famer at this point. MMA Rex, fantastic stuff. Paul Vivrette, anyone who just says Big Norm with no further explanation, no, like, you're on Team Ben right there. I did draft Norma Dumont first overall in the Sherdog staff fantasy MMA draft this year, and it was not just it wasn't a protest pick. Like, I really needed that low center of gravity on Team Duffy. So yeah, for saying Big Norm, Paul Vivrette is my listener of the night. Easiest question of the night or hardest question of the night, I don't know. What is your letter grade for UFC Fight Night 253, Kape versus Almabayev?
D+.
I'm just giving it straight D, pun not intended. Like, it wasn't a great card on paper. It didn't deliver greatness in the cage, and the main event ended weirdly and dumbly. Like, it's a D. And if I look back at the end of this year and I end up thinking this is the worst UFC card of 2025, that wouldn't shock me. But even the worst card is worth talking about afterwards, and I enjoyed talking about this one with you. Dayne, for the people who don't know, tell them who you are and where they can find your work.
Dayne Fox. I write a weekly column on Sherdog. You can find me also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the Dayne Fox. And every now and then you can also catch me on these After the Bell shows. It's not quite After the Bell anymore. Live recap show.
Yeah, I mean, I still call it After the Bell sometimes. Like I don't call it Beatdown After the Bell just because I feel like that's, I mean, not literally a trademark, but just something associated with the early aughts Sherdog Radio Network that I was a listener of as well. But yeah. So anyway, this has been the Sherdog Radio Network recap for UFC Vegas 103. I've been Ben. He has been Dayne. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for commenting. The UFC 313 preview should be up first thing Monday morning. Keith and I will be previewing that one. It is the polar opposite of this card in just about every way except for geographical location. It takes place at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, but aside from that, on paper, it is an absolute monster of a card. I can't wait to preview it, and then I can't wait to see it. Thank you all for listening, as always, and have a great night.